Good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I'm a marketing specialist here at Educate 360. Welcome to today's webinar, How to Create a Training Plan, presented by our Vice President of the Center for Leadership and Development, Dr. Jay Pugh. We are using Zoom for today's session, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with all of you in an email after the webinar. We do encourage participation throughout the webinar, so please use that chat or Q&A option for our short Q&A portion after the presentation. Before we jump into the presentation, I do have a small poll here to throw out to everyone, so I'll give us about 30 to 40 seconds to go ahead and answer while everyone trickles in. Give us about 5 more seconds. Seeing awesome answers coming in. Saw a question come in. Yeah, 5 would be the best for sure.
Yes, 5 means that you are super satisfied. Yes.
One is
being,
not awesome.
I really am not happy with where our current training program's sitting.
Awesome.
Great questions right out the gate. Yes. One being, yes, I'm not very particularly happy with our training program. 5 being, you know what, I'm very satisfied.
Alrighty. Can I change it? Oh no, it's okay. No worries. Thank you so much for participating. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Here are the results. Awesome. It's
Pretty solid bell curve. I like that. Excellent.
Lovely. Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, everyone.
Appreciate that. I think we'll go ahead and kick it off. It's always good to see kind of where views are, where mindsets are when it comes to leadership and development. And as Mariela has mentioned, my name is Dr. Jay Pugh. I'm our Vice President for the Center for Leadership and Development with New Horizons, an Educate 360 company. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how to create a more effective training plan, sort of how do we set this up, what resources do we need to tap into. And one question I kind of want to ask before we hop into the overall presentation is, what do you think the benefits are of setting up a training plan, a continuous learning plan for your employees? What do you think the benefits are? What benefits exist for setting up a training plan for your employees? A continuous learning plan, if you will. More engaged employees, better production, efficient operations. Great point there. Consistency to career development. I'm seeing expectations. Very good point there. Efficiency, profit, flexibility. These are such great answers. I like that because they may solve different problems, as Raj has mentioned. I really love that. And there are more resources. We end up building a much stronger bench. People end up being retained. There's growth. There's not gaps in our organization. You all are spot on when it comes to having an effective training plan. And so I always bring this up because, number one, it does bring a lot more agility to the table. It allows us to fill in places that we might not have learning capabilities existing. It allows us to be more flexible in our approaches. Number two, and a lot of people mention this, employee engagement. People feel like they are invested whenever they're invested in whenever they have a learning plan. And I really love this. It provides a corrective and a collective path. So brilliant stuff. Number three is that it does foster innovation. It allows us to stay at the forefront. And Janet mentions, hey, I want to make sure nothing's missed. That's exactly right. And I like that Irma mentions less tickets, right? When we have more innovation, we have more solutions to build better processes, to build better solutions. I agree with that. And lastly, the biggest thing is that it does really help and attract and retain talent. people, as we know in organizations, there are many people that leave one organization to go to another if they feel like A, they are treated better, B, if they have better opportunity to grow in that organization. So those are things that really come to the table. And so the reason why with corporate learning, if you're on this sector, is that we want to make sure that we have a learning plan that, number one, applies to the company's goals and the strategic visions, also while making sure that our employees feel like they're invested in, allows them to make sure that they are feeling responsible in what they're achieving. And so we want to make sure that balance exists. So as we go through this, I always find that the best corporate training plans, the best training plans that we could set up, number one, has an alignment with the vision. Number two, it supports the employee's career growth. And they must walk in line together. That is such a key point here that happens is that both of them have to be aligned in this. There has to be this understanding that, you know what, some people, we have to understand how people learn. So I'm going to ask you all another quick question. How many of you would say that you all prefer self-paced learning? Give me a thumbs up if you prefer self-paced learning. Okay, excellent. Excellent. I like that I'm seeing some as 50-50 for some topics. Very good. Not right. How many of you, I was going to say, Jill, compared to what? Great question. What about, I would prefer learning in person, having somebody come on site and learn in person and have a dedicated person deliver. What's really, and I like that some people, once again, it depends on the topic. And here's where I really like what I'm seeing. And I like that as an extrovert, in person's awesome. And once again, there's advantages and disadvantages to both. And I agree with this. I always say that self-paced learning is effective when it's capturing quicker things on the surface, when it's really trying to hone in on a specific skill, and whenever not everybody has the same availability to build into this. And on the other side, the in-person or the even virtual in-person, as we like to say, provides a little bit more of a connective touch. It allows a little bit more of addressing audiences' needs in the moment. And so there really is a true purpose to consider both of these as a training plan. Michael asks a great question right out the gate is, how do you overcome challenges in distance, RE in person? I will tell you that for me, I'm not saying I wrote the book. I wrote one of the books on remote engagement strategies. I am a huge fan. And for those that have been in some of my webinars already or have had courses with me, I am a massive fan of remote engagement. I don't think it will ever catch where in-person is, but I do think we can get it very, very close in the way we engage others. I think we know what engagement really looks like on a connective level. And it really is, Raj, great point that remote engagement strategies are so critical. And that's where an area of focus as mine is. I'll tell you that we've even built a course around it in our leadership and development space, is called Mastering Meaningful Engagement. And I'm a huge, huge fan of it because it really allows us to understand how to connect better with people that you might not be able to see all the time. So how do you make it feel like we're in the room together? And Lisa, you're absolutely right that it's not going away. So we really need to take into consideration what each training resource brings to the collective pool and how we can be able to maximize that effort. So when we talk about business goals, the biggest things that I have to make sure of, and sometimes this doesn't always align to what the employee's goals are, and we really have to understand how to navigate those conversations. The first thing is how do we stay competitive? You know, there's a lot of requests for things like AI. There's a lot, technology is constantly evolving. And Barbara, I appreciate you. Thank you for that. Excellent. And so it's like the pulling us behind the screen, right? Yeah, no, I love that. But I think when we talk about aligning skills to be competitive, there's so many needs with AI and with business analysis and data analysis. And that's such a shift that we're making right now. And are we remaining competitive in that space? What skills do our employees need? And this is where many of you have already mentioned that efficiency, that we're able to be effective and efficient, and that we're not wasting time in what we're trying to achieve. This one is my absolute favorite because I don't think in succession planning we do this as often as we should. But are there any roles or any positions, as we call this, or Julie Zhu calls this, and she's the VP of Facebook, she owns her own business, and she's so great, is one thing she talks about is, how do we start building the next set of pioneers? Are there any job roles that don't exist yet, but they're coming? And we need to put in the people in place to stay ahead of the game. Are we prepared for growth and scalability? And have we created these succession plans for the next wave of leadership? In my side of the business, folks, I can't tell you how many times, and if this is what you agree with too, how many of you are starting to see the changing of the guard in leadership? Meaning that leadership might be moving up, moving on, and we're trying to build in the next wave of leadership. How many of you are already starting to see that in your organization by a thumbs up, if that's the case? And I'm seeing it all across the board. This is what starts to happen. So how, and it never stops, Thomas. And so that's the thing is, how have we created those succession plans? And in public institutions, I would agree entirely, Raj, is that I don't know that in some government spaces, we see a lot of benefit. In other government spaces, we don't see that succession planning right away. And so we have to make sure that we are succession planning to provide for the next wave of leadership that's occurring. So I couldn't agree more. So that's the first piece of the business goal is, are we staying competitive? Are we making sure things are done efficiently and effectively? Are there any roles or jobs that we need to be looking ahead on proactively? Are there things, are we prepared to scale and grow at the pace where we are? And are we ready to build in the next wave of leadership? Now that's one side. The other side comes into, well, what does our employees want? And I will tell you right now, folks, even still, and I do think there might be trends in research and analysis right now are showing that it still is right now an employees market. It still is an employees market. Now that is starting to change a little bit back to more of a companies market. Just like how when you're buying a house, there's a buyer and a seller. In the workforce, there's typically either a company's market, which means they dictate a little bit more of the hiring that's occurring, the growth, the planning, and the employee has to kind of stay put or regather. And then there's sometimes the employees market, which means they can kind of shift anywhere, go anywhere, and do what they need to. So how do we get them to stay? Well, number one, we need to collaborate on that plan with them. We need to find mutual success. People, I have to tell you this. The greatest ideas ever generated are the ones where people believe it's their own. And what that means is that if our employees are collaborating on their plan and we're guiding them where growth can occur and they can see that vision too, they will much more likely connect to that and stay. So we have to identify strengths, skills, and interests. The key word here is interests. We have to pay attention to where that is. Sometimes we think, oh, well, we're seeing a skill here, and they go, I have no interest in this. I'll give an example in my space. I have no desire to be in instructional design. I am so envious of those that can do it. I have no interest in instructional design. But then if they're in my organization, they're like, wow, we see you in an instructional design role. We're misaligned. So we have to keep that in mind. For some, we may want to move them into leadership, but they may not want to do that. So how do we keep that in mind? We have to make sure we're gathering the feedback. We have to identify skills gaps and areas and have the dialogues with our employees as that occurs. And lastly, we really need to pay attention to what their aspirations are. Sometimes that means that maybe we need to scale them in. Some people, they want to be CEO in the first 5 years, right? And sometimes it's all right, well, we might have to scale that back a little bit, but I think there's ways that we can continue to have you grow and go, right? And keep doing that. So it really requires those deeper influential dialogues, and it really requires a more thorough understanding of what these plans can look like. So I have an example for you that I'd like for you to see. I love this example, and the reason why I do this is because I love having employees come to the table first with what they believe their reality is, what they think their options are, what they think their way forward is. And what things, how often would they love to meet about this, to talk about future goals? And then on the other side, what I love to talk about with an effective training plan is really getting into saying, you know what, here's where we see it. And here's where I've seen success for this person. Here's something where I see great progress in the way they're going to commit to it. I like this because this creates a universal alignment between employee, between manager, and between organization. I want to get what your thoughts. I want to open up the floor to you for a minute. What are your thoughts as you see this in action? What are your thoughts as you're noticing the comments, the business goal matches? What do you notice about these things? And my apologies. I just had somebody attack our what I really like about this is I love that I'm seeing that it's a collaborative approach that and sometimes, Jennifer, we don't see this in organizations. I like the fact that I'm seeing review and feedback, that there's a structured approach that allows people to be, Raj or Tong mentions, allows expectations to be transparent on both sides. And Raj, I really like this approach of revolutionary. And once again, it's not chaotic. It's not overkill, but what it does is it allows the employee to have stake in their own buy-in. And I like that, Jake, that you had it, and it does. Oh, great terminology, Jake. Agency. It does give them agency. And I agree, Thomas. It has to be a mutually beneficial approach. I love that, Barbara. Yep, that it does allow a visual component. And I like Excel mentions that it's actually rating themselves, and they are making sure that they are truly having some input to their growth. I bring this up because I think from a lot of organizational structures, what has happened is that there has been a top-down mentality in the way that training and development comes in. Some of that is rightly so, because ultimately they're the ones investing the money and making sure that they want to see a return on their investment. Completely understand that side of it. At the same time, it costs so much less to retain your employees by focusing on their training programs, by making sure that they're getting resources to learn and they're investing them. It costs so much less for them to do that than the turnover that's on the other side. So here's a loaded question for you. Now, this is just an entry-level employee alone. Anybody know how much it costs to replace an employee? With time, effort, rehiring? Love the guesses so far. I will tell you that it is 5 to 6 months of the person's salary that has left. 5 to 6 months of that person's salary. The reason why is because now, and I say, and that's why I'm saying entry level position a little bit, Irma, in that case. And the reason why I bring this up is because leaders, you ready for replacing a leader? It's between 115 to 140%. The reason why is because there is, number one, the work that gets pulled away for other people to have to step in and do the work. Then on top of that, there's recruitment. And Barbara, I love that. Hey, love that we're already leading right into this. It's the recruitment that goes into it. The manager having to pull their time to be a part of the hiring process. They lose their time for scalability, for growth, for strategic planning. They lose that side of it. On top of that, there's onboarding, initial training, development. And then we have to get that person up to the same speed where the previous person was at that moment. And that's the thing, is that if it's got to be a fit too. So we have to really make sure we're taking some, and it is. And if we do, that's why hiring is also so important. I'm seeing comments come through on that to where hiring is extremely important. And so it really is important to pay a close attention to, are we hiring the right people? Are we growing the right people? And are we investing in the right people? And that's why a training plan is so critical, because it's not only just a human investment, it is a business and financial investment as well. Now, there are a couple different ways we can go about this. Some people, we take the career ladder approach, and there are certain people that want to grow up the corporate ladder. That's the leadership approach, the vertical movement. But there are also other people that want to do the career lattice, to where they may want to learn a new departmental piece or a new technological piece. I've watched people that are great data analysts that go into BA roles, that get their CBAP certifications. And that's what that really means, is that not everybody wants to move up. They might want to move across, move diagonally. They may want to make a different shift. So the big thing that we have to ask people, and I love that, Thomas. Yes, that's exact. Thomas said the word so well. I have to repeat exactly the words he said. Not everybody comes in a predetermined trajectory. So what we really have to ask our employees is, are you looking to move up a corporate ladder? Are you looking to move up? Or are you looking to spread out and look into more of a lattice approach? What do you want out of the company you work for? So I bring this up because unique people require different trainings. And this is why I asked you already. Some people prefer the live synchronous training. And Jennifer, it is good for us to set the expectations for them. Absolutely. It's okay to say that typically for an organization of this nature, this is something that we find where people can move. Or if we're looking for here, this is an approach, this is about a time that it takes. And agreed, Irma, absolutely supportive managers and agency. That's something we have to make sure of, is that it's a fit for the person with the organization. Now, from this approach of live, or what I call synchronous training versus asynchronous training, there's a world for both. And typically, I'll say where New Horizons is in our space, we are a world leader in not only the on-site instructor-led training, but the virtual instructor-led training as well. However, we are also massive fans, and we do have components that we build in that are e-learning capabilities. So it does require us to really focus on what live and asynchronous options are out there for our teams. Now, I always say that no matter what learning opportunities are out there, what they should do is they should allow opportunity to garner knowledge that's going to really create productivity. Number one, it should boost productivity. Number two, what it should also do is it should give opportunity to build camaraderie, teamwork, and allow people to get to know each other as humans. Anybody know that one of the biggest things that has shifted during the pandemic as to why people felt like they were most frustrated? The number one complaint of working remotely was loneliness. They felt disconnected. And it's amazing because people are loving the remote environment, but that's the number one thing that they're finding, is that there isn't that collaboration. There isn't that connectedness. So we have to make sure, and that's exactly right, Raj. Disconnected means less growth potential. The more people feel alone, the more they don't feel psychologically safe, the more they feel like they've lost their purpose. The other thing that we have to make sure of is that we are cost effective. And sometimes that means, hey, we want to build an internal training program, and we are fully supportive of that. The challenge of that is sometimes that's not always cost effective because it takes time and investment and vetting, planning, strategy that goes all into that cost effectiveness. And sometimes it's good to take an external approach as well. So what I always say to do in your training plan is evaluate it. Evaluate it. Allow yourself the opportunity to ask, are there assessments during the training? Are there observations occurring? Are there post-training assessments or demos or opportunities? What are the employees saying? Are there a survey after each of those? And what does that survey entail? Those are things that we really want. So we have a few minutes remaining, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to offer questions. What questions do we have?
Hey, Jake, I'll let our audience throw a couple questions in the chat or the Q&A, but we have a couple here ready to go. How can I align and balance the business training goals and employee training goals?
Say that again one more time, Mariella, just so I can understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. How can I align and balance business training goals and employee training goals? I'm assuming like their own goals that they want with their training program, business training program. Yeah.
What One thing that I typically always recommend is I love doing engagement surveys, number one. And the reason why, now you have to do an engagement survey with a true purpose of not trying to hide answers. You have to do it for the sake of saying, we really want to know what you want to learn. We really want to know what it is that you're really diving into. And then what we do is we gather that information and we tie that to see what objectives our organization's trying to achieve. So I always like the engagement surveys, but we can't just say, here's an engagement survey. We really have to pitch the engagement survey to really say, look, we're not giving you this engagement survey to say, here you go. We're doing this because we really want to learn what matters to you.
Excellent. We have another one here. Is there a strategy for team members to make managers aware of a need for training?
Number one, you could send them this recording. No, I always say that one thing that I always like to mention is to make managers aware of that is I really do believe that it is crucial for us to present it in a way to managers of saying, man, I just saw this presentation, and one of the biggest things that companies are doing are developing training plans. Do we have anything like that? Are we doing anything of that nature? We've seen, we've joined this webinar where there were hundreds of people on this, and, we've seen that there's companies that are doing this. Are we doing this? And I think it's okay to ask that question to make sure that we're still staying competitive in the space.
Absolutely. All right. Well, it looks like that concludes all of our questions. We just got a lot of great comments on the presentation and use of time, but I do think that this actually leads in perfectly to another poll we have. So I'm going to go ahead and launch it just so that you guys can get some more insight on what this looks like. It is about the involvement of the training
Once
process. Where do
again,
you
I
see
would
yourself?
say, to clarify on this, one saying I have no involvement, five being that I am the one deciding what our training plans are.
Absolutely. So I'll give us about 30 seconds to get those last minute answers in and
And I
just
appreciate the feedback, everybody. Thank you so much. As always, I saw a few familiar faces, and it's so good to see. Good to see you all.
absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining us. And just to give you, we had a question here about the recording. If you need any more info on this topic, please do not be afraid to visit us at educate360.com. And if you missed out on any part of this session, be on the lookout for a recording that will come to you in an email after the webinar. So be on the lookout for that. And
Excellent.
I will
I,
go ahead and
I
end this poll.
I have one final question about what happens when you have different levels of technological understanding. What do you typically do? Number one, you just dive right into what do you know. I always love the question of what do you know, because then that gives us a guide. And then what I would say is we in our space we have 100 account managers that can be able to answer those questions. Hey, based on, let's say, Excel, hey, they know how to, format cells, they know how to set up a spreadsheet, but they're not great with pivot tables. Well, our account managers can set that up and say, oh, it might mean that they might need an Excel part 2 class. That's what our account managers are fantastic at. So other than that, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Bye.